He's the former president and publisher of the Sun Herald, and now he's on the radio. Welcome to Coast View with Ricky Matthews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome to Coast View, the show that celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi a better place to live, work, and play. And Mississippi, for that matter, especially today. We've got a very special guest in the first half. We have Senator Briggs Hobson in the first half of the show, and then we're going to have another conversation with Chief John Miller, the Chief of Police for the city of Biloxi. So it's going to be a terrific show. Abraham Lincoln once said, "Be sure you put your feet in the right place and then stand firm." He also said this that I'll never forget, and I think it applies well to our guest today. "I am not bound to win, but I am bound to be true. I'm not bound to succeed, but I am bound to live by the light that I have. I must stand with anybody that stands right, and stand with him while he is right, and part with him when he goes wrong." I've watched our first guest for many years. We've never met that I'm aware of. But when I did my research on Senator W. Briggs Hobson III, a Republican from member of the Mississippi Senate, representing District 23 since 2008, which incidentally is Issaquah, Warren, and Yazoo counties, essentially the Vicksburg region, I couldn't help but think about those Lincoln quotes. Another quote actually comes to mind. I'm a big fan of Charles Krauthammer, and he said this: "Ideas matter. Legislative proposals matter. Slick campaigns and dazzling speeches can work for a while, but the magic always wears off." He was speaking about the importance of the legislative process. Senator Hobson understands how important the legislative process is to the success of our great state. He's become a critical leader in the state of Mississippi as he works, as he's led and done his work in the legislature. His leadership is also really important to coastal Mississippi. He's a rising star, and you're about to understand why I say that when you get the opportunity to get to know him better. So welcome to the Coast View, Senator Hobson.
Ricky, it's my pleasure to be with you. I'm excited, as we were talking beforehand. You know, I've got a lot of connections to the coast, so it's really exciting for me to visit with you and Kyle today, and also to have an opportunity to maybe say hello virtually to some of my friends down there on the coast.
Yeah, no, we you know, this is a special place, and as you mentioned to me, you actually worked down here for a law firm for a period of time. You spent some time in New Orleans. We'll go through some of that in this conversation today, but before we go any further, I know that COVID really took a toll on the legislature as a result of the recent session. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Actually, we finished session and I was not feeling good. And frankly, I thought that maybe I had the coronavirus, and tested at the Capitol about 2 weeks ago and tested negative, thankfully. But then I just didn't feel good for several days. Maybe it was the tough session we had and I was worn down, but I've been tested twice and thankfully tested negative. But I know we've got a lot of friends and a lot of my colleagues that have been diagnosed with the virus, and a couple, as you know, one on the coast is not doing well, from what I understand. And my prayers are with our good friend, representative from the House. But you know, I'm doing fine, and thank you for asking.
You're welcome. It really has taken its toll, and we are all praying for everyone to have speedy and healthy recoveries. We had this legislative session that we just got out of was critical in so many different dimensions, and I watched your leadership with really great interest. And when I learned that your iconic father had passed away during the session, it even impressed me more, the leadership that you provided. Your father was Dr. Briggs Hobson Jr. of Vicksburg. Mayor Flagg said of him that he was a community man and that he was always standing on the side of progress. There are so many accolades. Your father really earned the respect of that community. I'm curious about how your dad inspired you to become a better leader.
You know, my dad was my biggest and best role model. And as I was trying to say before we broke up there, that two things that really stood out for me as a leader: one, he never talked bad about anyone else, and two is that he never complained about work. And those are two great attributes for someone to have. And And there were so many other things my dad did that just influenced my life greatly. And I'm really blessed to have had him as a role model and as a father. He had a great last day of his life. He got an opportunity to go to his childhood home with my brother. And then he came to our house. My wife and I had bought the house that he and my mother built. They downsized, and he came over to our house for the first time after we bought it. We had done a little renovation work, and he just seemed so happy, and left our house, and about an hour later passed away. But it was, as sad as it was to lose my father, I feel so fortunate to have the memories and the strong legacy that he left for me and for my siblings and a lot of other people in this community. And the outpouring of love and affection has been overwhelming. And the stories I've heard about my dad that I didn't know, and things he did for people, have just really warmed my heart in a way that it's hard to describe.
So obviously he had his whole life, your whole life, had a huge impact on your wanting to be in public service and your ability to want to give back to the community. Tell me about that.
And interestingly, really not from the standpoint of being a leader, a public leader, if you will. It was more of just do the right thing and try to help out, make your community a better place, make your state a better place, make your nation a better place. And there was no direction that he gave. He never said, hey, Briggs, you need to go out and do this. It was more of just do the right things and work hard, and your life will be so rich. And he commonly said how he had lived such a rich, full life. And I think it was because Dad had a servant's mentality. He always liked helping other people. He didn't care too much about getting helped. He wanted to help other people. And, that's the old parable. You get more out of giving than you do receiving. And I think Dad lived that kind of life. And maybe that's worn off on us a little bit.
Is it true what I read about a James Meredith connection?
Yes. Interestingly, my dad was the surgeon at the hospital in Memphis when Meredith got shot during the Freedom March back in the 60s. And my dad was the one that removed some of the stuff that could be removed after that. Another interesting thing about that, James Meredith has come to see me not knowing that my father was actually, until later, that my father was actually the one who had done that. But he's come to see me a couple of times in the Capitol and expressed some with very much hope for the future of Mississippi, but also, some concerns too. And I've had some very interesting conversations with that gentleman, and I'm really honored to have gotten to know him and continue to get to speak with him occasionally.
Wow, that's an incredible connection with history, and you know what they say about 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah, that's right.
It's amazing how all those dots connect. Tell me about growing up in Vicksburg.
Oh, Vicksburg's a great place. I love my community, and like I said, I grew up here. I went to school at Ole Miss, both undergraduate and law school, and then moved to New Orleans. I was recruited by a firm there to go work after law school, and then, of course, ended up on the coast for 3 years and then back to Vicksburg. But Vicksburg's a wonderful place. Talked to an old friend of mine yesterday and just reliving some good stories about kind of a wholesome upbringing. Same thing you would have on the coast. A lot of good people and people that care about their community and care about their fellow man and woman. And so I feel blessed to have grown up here.
So the whole topic of law has really served you well. Are you still an adjunct professor at the Mississippi School of Law?
No, I did that for a couple of years back before I was elected to office, and then I did it even afterwards, and it just became very difficult, Ricky. I was having a hard time. I've got my hands full with my law practice and with the legislative work, so I had to give that one up.
Tell me about your family.
Married now for 25 years. My wife, Allie, who's also an Ole Miss graduate, she's got a degree from Southern Miss too. She's a dietitian, and she's from Baton Rouge originally. And then I've got 3 children. I've got one that's just graduated from Ole Miss. I've got a sophomore, will be a junior at Southern Miss, and then I've got a daughter who's a senior in high school.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So when we come back, I want to talk about what your current chairmanship is all about. What is Judiciary Division A Committee, and why is that important to the overall workings of the legislature, the Senate in particular? And kind of go through some of your committee assignments over the years. So you've been in the legislature for 12 years. You've really kind of seen it all in that period of time, and you continue to learn. But I want to take that journey with you, and we'll see you when we get back on the other side of this. This is Senator Briggs Hobson from Vicksburg.
You can also listen live to SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1 on your Amazon Alexa devices. Once you've enabled the skill, just say, Alexa, open SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast.
SuperTalk. Nobody keeps Mississippi informed like we do. With 12 stations covering all 82 counties. If it happens in your state, we're on top of it. The news, the weather, the sports, and the talk that's important to you. The issues that matter to you, your family, and your bank account. It's all right here. And when you're away from home, depend on the SuperTalk app and supertalk.fm to stay in the know. We're proud to serve our fellow Mississippians. SuperTalk Mississippi.
COVID-19 is a severe lung infection. Trust the American Lung Association for science-based public health information, especially for the 36 million Americans who live with lung disease. We have resources to protect your lung health. Access expertise from medical professionals and peer-to-peer support through our online communities. Visit lung.org for daily updates.
This is House Call for Health. Medical researchers spend years developing drugs to treat cancer, but it's possible the next big cancer-fighting breakthrough could already be in your medicine cabinet. Scientists have long known that a drug for one ailment can sometimes be effective in treating something else. Aspirin is the most famous example. Researchers at Harvard, MIT, and the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute tested more than 4,500 existing medications. They found 48 drugs that killed at least some cancer cells. These drugs are for several different conditions, including diabetes, inflammation, and alcoholism. One drug is used for treating arthritis in dogs. Researchers in the journal Nature Cancer said the medications sometimes worked in different ways than mainstream cancer drugs. Now they hope these drugs can be further developed into true new weapons against cancer. For more health news, go to foxnewshealth.com. House Call for Health. I'm Lisa Brady, Fox News.
Whether you're a Rebel, a Bulldog, a Golden Eagle, or just a sports fan, SuperTalk Mississippi has got a podcast for you. For you. Sports Talk Mississippi, the Rebel Report, Thunder and Lightning, the SuperTalk Eagle Hour, and the Borky Show are all now available for you. And it's all free. Get them all on demand at supertalk.fm and on your smartphone. Just search for SuperTalk on iTunes, Google Play, or anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Hey, want to come work for the #1 radio group on the coast? TeleSouth Media has a great opportunity for an outside sales consultant. Get paid while having fun and work in the exciting, fast-paced world of radio. We have award-winning stations like 97.9 CPR Rocks, 105.9 The Monkey, G96.7, SuperTalk 103.1, and 103.5 The Possum. Take the first step towards a new and rewarding career. Submit your resume to Jesse at telesouth.com. That's JESSE at telesouth.com. TeleSouth Media is an equal employment opportunity employer.
Be sure to go by this station's website and check out the half-off deals. Audubon Zoo tickets for just $15. That's half price. $30 zoo tickets for just $15. Again, go to this station's website or Facebook. Look for the half-off deals logo to purchase yours now.
Talking to the people that help make the coast such a unique place to live. This is Coast View with Ricky Matthews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View. We have Senator Briggs Hobson with us from Vicksburg. And we talked a lot about, where he came from, his father, who was really an important leader, someone who influenced a lot of people during his time as a doctor in Vicksburg. But what I want to ask you, we started the session out with a quote, "Be sure you put your feet in the right place and then stand firm by Abraham Lincoln. When you hear that, Briggs, what do you think about it?
Well, I had not heard that quote before, but as we were in the break, somebody came up about the flag issue, and I don't know if you want to go down that path, and I'll leave that up to you. But anyway, I think that might be an example of the way that I want to be known as a public leader, and that is the, step in the right place for making what you think is the right decision. And people have plenty of different ideas on what the right decision is. I understand it. That's a great thing about our country is you can certainly have whatever opinions you want and express them in any way you want to. But, step into the place where you think you need to be and where you think the state needs to go, and you stand strong despite the winds that may be in your face. And in the long run, I always say this, if I do what I think is right, I don't have a problem sleeping at night. I go home every night and sleep well, and I'm confident that the Lord is going to, bless you in a way that will strengthen you to be the kind of person you need to be. And it may not be in public service, it may be in something else, but it's what I think is the right thing to do.
I respect you greatly for that. As a publisher, say the last 16 years of my career, we talked about this in the last few days with another guest, but someone asked me one time when I made a tough decision and wrote a tough editorial, taking a stand that may not be popular, did you lose sleep over it? And I said, for a matter of fact, no, I didn't. And went home and slept really good. The sleep that I lost was prior to taking that stand, as I did my homework, as I came to that place where I was going to take the stand and vote my conviction. That's when I lost my sleep, making sure I was doing the right thing, making sure I was talking to people, gaining as much perspective as I possibly can. So by the time it came time to make the decision to take the stand, I could defend it. I could say from deep in my soul how I believed, what I believed about that. That's what you did. And when I watched you in the legislative session, as specifically as it relates to the flag, you stood and you were empathetic, but you led, and you voted your conviction, and you did it with certainty because you believed in your heart of hearts you were doing the right thing. Is that correct? Oh,
no doubt about that. And what you just said, I think is very profound about the sleepless nights beforehand. Anytime that I've had tough decisions, I certainly can have some tough nights, and I've had a few of those over the now 13 years I've served in the legislature, where there's a tough issue. It's an emotional issue. People have very, very strong, deep-seated opinions on those issues, but I want to do all the research. I want to talk to people. I want to know all the different angles before I make my decision. But once I've made my decision, I've made it for what I think are the right reasons, and I'm convicted in that. And it's easy to sleep after that. So what you said is spot on. I tell you, that's my experience in the legislature.
So tell me about being chairman of the Judiciary Division A Committee and why that puts you, help our people understand how that puts you at the center of that particular situation.
Well, actually, I'm chairman of Appropriations. I was formerly chairman of Judiciary A. Okay. I'm chairman of Appropriations right now. But I have been chair of Judiciary A, and I've been chair of Energy, the Energy Committee. But now I'm Appropriations chair. But that's not why I ended up in that position, but for the position on the flag, if that's what you're asking. Yeah. But I've certainly been, I've done a lot of work in Judiciary A, 6 years as chairman. Yeah. I was looking at this bio, and it wasn't updated to include the chairmanship of Appropriation, which is where you were this past. And that there could never have been a more critical time to be the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, wouldn't you say? No, it's a huge year. I mean, there was a lot of things going on. The flag, of course, is one of those monumental type decisions. But this year we had the CARES Act issue, and we had a little squabble with the governor at one point about the allocation and who would appropriate those funds. Then we had to take care of appropriating those funds, and then we had our normal budget, and it was a bad budget year, frankly. I mean, our state lost hundreds of millions of dollars through this process. We were in excellent shape prior to the coronavirus hitting, and I can talk more about that later if you want to, but we weathered the storm through that, and then we had to set a budget for next year, which is the primary focus of appropriations. And that process included looking at roughly and when you consider deficits, about a $250 million shortfall for next year. So that made it a very difficult year. So there was a lot going on this year, no question about that.
Well, I would say, when you looked at, and that was the lion's share of that money was somewhere in the April timeframe. Thank God, as we began to open up the economy, that the deficit did not remain at that point, because it would have been just devastating to the state. And when we talk about, isn't it interesting that something like a face mask can become politicized? It's really amazing. People say, well, as they argue the face mask, they say, well, what do you want us to do? Shut down the economy? Well, no, actually, that's why we want you to wear the face mask, so we don't have to shut down the economy. What's your thoughts about that?
Well, I think the important thing, let me take it first of all from an economic standpoint. We don't want the cure to be worse than the disease. What I mean by that is we've got to be looking at not just, first of all, making sure that public health is at the forefront or the primary issue to cover. But we also need to make sure that we're not going to shut down the economy, because that creates other problems too. I mean, people that can't go to work. I've got a lot of friends just like you do who are struggling making ends meet right now because they can't keep their business open. And then you get into issues of depression and some other health issues. You got people who, their livelihood, they've got stress on their marriage and their family relationships, and those are important too. We just need to be careful about I think being cognizant of the health issues and trying to be, concerned about those that have other health issues, but also trying to do as much business as usual, so to speak, to keep our economy moving along.
Well, I mean, there probably has never been a more critical time in our state's history for us to work together. One of the things that I like about where we are in the state at this point, and that is that if you look at the noise on the national stage with the polarization that is happening, it's great to see that Democrats and Republicans can come together and agree on some things that are important to this state, that we're able to come together, and we're not nearly as divided in this state as you would see on the national stage. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think that's a good point, and I'll tell you a little story. Alan Nunnally, former congressman from the northern part of the state, and I were good friends, and I served with him my first few years in the legislature. Alan subsequently was elected from the state Senate up to the U.S. House. And I was up in D.C. with Alan one time. We were together, and he lamented that, he said, Briggs, what's disappointing, I remember the good old days when I was in Mississippi when we would go to lunch or dinner together, be Republicans and Democrats. We didn't care. We were just willing to work with each other to try to get out a good product for our state. And Alan said, up here in Washington, I can't, I almost cannot go to lunch or dinner with a person across the aisle. Except people will just beat you up and wear you out on reaching across the aisle. And that really saddened me to hear that. And I think that's one of the big differences between the state level and the national level. And let me say this too. I talk to a lot of my friends around the country in other states. Some other states are like that at the national level, where Republicans and Democrats can't get along. Now, we may not always agree on political issues here in Mississippi, Republicans and Democrats, that is, but we can get along and we talk together. We work together, we talk a lot, and we try to come to some solution that's good for our state. And I think that's so healthy, because I think that's one of the problems in our national government right now is people just aren't sitting down and talking. You can work out a lot of problems if you get together and talk instead of just throwing grenades across the aisle at the other ones. And that's what's disappointing to see at the national level.
Yeah, too often, especially these days on the national level, that the polarized ends are defining the conversation. When most Americans, I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, most Americans are somewhere in the middle. And, everyone, I think, is frustrated by the fact that we can't seem to move. A great example would be you're either for law and order or you're for racial justice. You can't be for both, which is crazy. I mean, it's crazy. We need law and order, and we need to address the racial sins of the past and just accept that reality and move forward. And why can't we do that in a way that builds a better country? I'm just blown away by where we have found ourselves.
Yeah, I think about the days of Reagan and O'Neill. Those two guys were opposites. I wouldn't say polar opposites, but they were certainly opposite on political issues. And And in fact, if you look back, and I remember that was kind of my formative years of watching politicians, you know, they would certainly do a little grandstanding in front of the microphone. Each side would, but they would commonly get together and talk about what they could do to resolve the differences. And I think that was a good thing. Whereas nowadays you just don't see that very often, where you have, you know, the president or a Democratic leader getting together, or you see a leader of one chamber and the other chamber getting together, and that's frustrating. I just wish we could get back to the day where, you know, you might have you can state your position and you can stand up and grandstand if you want to, but there's a time to roll up your shirt sleeves and get to work and get things done for our country, and I wish we saw more of that.
Me too. Listen, I wish we had more time together. Briggs, it's been terrific, you know, visiting with you. Thank you for your leadership, and we'll stay in touch with you. We'll come back in a month or so and see how things are going. This has been Senator Briggs Hobson from Vicksburg, and someone who we'll keep in touch with. I appreciate you visiting with us.
Thank you, Ricky. It's been my pleasure to be with you and Kyle, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you. And tell my friends on the coast I said hello.
I'll do it. We'll have Chief Miller from the Biloxi Police Department coming up next.
Subscribe for free to the Coast View podcast on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Feeling down? Here's your prescription for a daily dose of good news and positive vibes. Good Things with Rebecca Turner. Every afternoon, Rebecca highlights all the good things happening right here in the state you call home. Daily exposure to Good Things with Rebecca Turner may cause smiling, feelings of positivity, happiness, and even laughter. When you experience these symptoms, tell your friends to listen.
Okay.
Weekdays starting at 2 p.m. here on SuperTalk Mississippi, and now on Amazon Alexa devices.
We know that we're asking Americans to do a lot right now. So we're asking everyone to be selfless for others so that we can protect those who are most susceptible to this virus.
A question I often get asked is, why should young people care about the spread of coronavirus? Well, we know that people with underlying medical conditions over the age of 60 are at highest risk, but they've got to get it from somebody.
Social distancing is really physical separation of people.
It's what we refer to when we ask people to stay at least 6 feet apart.
Not going to bars, not going to restaurants, not going to theaters where there are a lot of people. It all just means physical separation so that you have a space between you and others who might actually be infected or infect you.
We all have a role to play in preventing person-to-person spread of this disease, which can be deadly for vulnerable groups. For more information on how you can social distance, please go to coronavirus.gov.
Hey, I'm Steve Azar, and you never know who or what you'll hear when I spend a Mississippi Minute with my friends. Talking to Paul Thorne, Mississippi true treasure, really incredible recording artist, singer, songwriter, has been doing it a long time, doing it the right way.
It's almost like a Forrest Gump thing because I was a boxer, / I worked in a furniture factory, / I had a gig 2 nights a week playing my acoustic guitar in a pizza restaurant, / I was in the National Guard, and
wow.
All this stuff was going on at the same time. / I had a writing contract with Rick Hall and Fame.
In a Mississippi Minute. Be sure to check out In a Mississippi Minute with me, Steve Azar, right here on SuperTalk Mississippi, the SuperTalk Mississippi app, and now available on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher.
We serve on the front lines, fighting an invisible enemy and caring for our communities with courage and compassion. The COVID-19 crisis has challenged us like never before. Now, the men and women of America's hospitals and health systems are counting on Congress and the administration to stand with us as we stand ready to care for you in every way, every day.
If a muckety muck wants you to hear what they gotta say, they come here first and sit down with Gallo and JT. This is ground zero for all Mississippi muckety mucks. SuperTalk Mississippi. Watch your favorite SuperTalk shows in HD. Just go to supertalktv.com. Ever wonder what goes on in the studio during the shows? Now you can watch what happens in HD. SuperTalk TV, streaming now on supertalktv.com.
what would happen if I had to pick up the phone, call 911 for one of my family members or one of my neighbors? What would I do if no one was on the other end to respond? What if there was no 911? So you can be a part of the solution.
Anybody can be a firefighter. Male, female, younger, older.
We have school teachers. We have leaders in business.
Is me, you, anyone that wants to be.
There is no typical firefighter.
This is House Call for Health. There may be no greater medical mystery and no greater tragedy than sudden infant death syndrome. It used to be known as crib death. For no apparent reason, a presumably healthy sleeping baby dies. Medical experts don't have clear-cut answers to what causes sudden infant death, or SIDS, but now they have two risk factors: smoking and drinking during pregnancy beyond the first 3 months. A new study finds that babies whose mothers drank alcohol and smoked tobacco after the first trimester are at far greater risk of SIDS, 12 times greater. Previous studies showed a risk of smoking and drinking individually. This study says doing both drastically increases the danger. The research is sponsored by the National Institutes of Health, which is calling for greater publicity about the danger and improved screening at the very beginning of a pregnancy. For more health news, go to foxnewshealth.com. House Call for Health. I'm Lisa Brady, Fox News.
Hey, want to come work for the #1 radio group on the coast? TeleSouth Media has a great opportunity for an outside sales consultant. Get paid while having fun and work in the exciting, fast-paced world of radio. We have award-winning stations like 97.9 CPR Rocks, 105.9 The Monkey, G96.7, SuperTalk 103.1, and 103.5 The Possum. Take the first step towards a new and rewarding career. Submit your resume to Jesse@telesouth.com. That's JESSE@telesouth.com. TeleSouth Media is an equal employment opportunity employer.
He's the former president and publisher of the Sun Herald, and now he's on the radio. Welcome to Coast View with Ricky Matthews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View. That was a terrific conversation with Senator Briggs Hobson from Vicksburg. If you missed it, you can go to the Facebook Gulf Coast Facebook page and watch it and see why he's such a critical leader to this state. I can't say that strongly enough. What a terrific leader he is. Speaking of good leadership, we've got Chief John Miller, the chief of police for the city of Biloxi, with us now. Chief, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
As I mentioned, we met last on March the 19th. The pandemic was just beginning to get known. I went back and watched that interview. We talked about a lot of issues. We actually had Vincent Creel with us at the beginning of the conversation, but, we pretty much sort of understood what was going to unfold in front of us. We didn't have a sense at the time that we would still be here, but I think, we hadn't fully grasped this could go on for a long, long, long time. We were still talking about once we get on the other side of it, but there's no other side of it. As I've described on this show many times, it's like a hurricane. COVID is sitting on top of us. It's just the eye of the storm. We don't yet know what's on the other side of this. And we're just having to learn to operate in these very unusual situations. And one of the things you did in that conversation is you sort of spelled out the kind of things that you were putting in place to keep your officers safe, to keep the community safe. So anyway, why don't you kind of update us? What have you learned over the last 2 or 3 months?
Sure. Well, I'm going to tell you, we have absolutely learned to be very fluid and not expect that this thing is going to end anytime soon. I think that's apparent to everybody. We've been very fortunate, I think, and I believe a lot of it has to do with being put in place early on. We have just had our first case of a positive COVID test in the police department, and that was not a sworn person, but it is in the police department. So I feel I hate we have that case, but I feel very good about it because, we have almost 200 employees and we've been able to keep this thing at bay here. And I think a lot of that had to do with wearing masks early, and doing the hand sanitizer early on. And then our building here, the police department, we've had people that just make the rounds constantly. When we started downstairs and in the lobby, and they sanitize everything, and then they move upstairs, they move all the way through the building, and they go right back to the front, start again. So every few hours, everything is sanitized and wiped down, and I honestly believe that's probably what has helped us get to this point.
Well, Chief, when you consider the extraordinary amount of contact, you're, force of about 100, and then when you count all the other folks that are involved in administration and whatever, man, that's incredible that you've only had one case.
It really is, and knock on wood and say a prayer. I hope that's all we have, and it may not be. But again, we've been very fortunate. We've been able to stay healthy and able to help the community when they need us.
So explain to me, what's the life of a patrolman these days. Tell me about that.
Well, I can tell you that it's much different than it was when I was a patrolman, and we've had to realize that. It's a much different. Law enforcement is a much different animal now, and it should be. Like with anything, we've progressed and gotten better and learned a lot of lessons, and I think those lessons that we learned maybe years ago that we implemented have certainly helped us in this area. We haven't had the problems, again, knock on wood, that you've seen in other cities. And I like to believe that's because of our hiring practices and the way we train our people. And I honestly believe that's what it is. A officer now is, at one time, it was, we had to teach them to, rope ride and shoot, and that was about what you needed to know, but now it's a much more community-oriented way of doing business. And we've been at that level here for quite a few years. So, but daily, there's a lot more citizen contact. We're a little freer with being friendly with each other and to the public. And I personally think that's the way that a police department needs to operate anyway. And so we, I guess part of our problem right now is not being able to hire, young people that we would like to see young people coming into this business.
So you heard Senator Hobson and I talk about this toward the end of our conversation, but it is incredible, actually, that on the national level, we've gotten ourselves in a place where you're either for law enforcement or you're for racial justice. You can't be for both. And one of the things that you and I talked about in the last conversation was that for the most part, police departments in coastal Mississippi, and really are throughout Mississippi, but especially here on the coast, have had really good communication and relationships with diverse communities. I mean, there's always going to be some stresses and needs to improve things and improve communication and whatever. But for the most part, we've done a pretty good job, wouldn't you say?
We absolutely have, and that's due to that's due to the way we get along, and it's due to there's a bunch of community leaders out there, black and white, that have stepped in and made sure that we all understand each other well. I mean, the Unity March that we had here, the Unity March they had in Gulfport, and that was headed up by Greg Whitfield. I thought he did a great job. I told him he did a positive thing. And then, Reverend Pickett, he's also stepped forward and bridged some gaps there, if there were gaps in the community. So I really appreciate those people stepping up, and helping us move forward and helping the community to see that we really do not have, certainly have problems, but we do not have those problems that you see in bigger cities.
It's you and I, again, we've talked about this before, but it's amazing how one bad cop can too often set everyone else back. And then when you have the issues that we've had, to what extent, I'm curious, does it create additional challenges for you in recruitment?
Sure. Well, let me start by saying this. Law enforcement is a unique field to be in. It always has been, but the last few years it's become very challenging. Law enforcement I can't think of another career where if someone does something in another city, it affects that business or that career field across the board. Law enforcement does that. You have a cop in Minneapolis that does something ridiculous, and people tend to view that as, well, that is a standard law enforcement practice. So I would urge people, and not just with law enforcement, but when claims are made, or when there's an organization that you think you need to be a part of, always stop for a second and do a little research and make sure that what is being said is actually factual. Because words are cheap, and there's a whole lot that people can just spew out that really is just not factual, just not true. Law enforcement, like with any other profession, there's going to be some undesirable folks that make their way in. Even though we've really tightened we've really tightened our hiring practices, and it's not an easy thing to become a policeman here anymore. And I know a lot of your larger cities, their hiring practices, they've tightened them, but they have such a need for policemen that I'm afraid that some of the hiring standards may not have been employed like they are here along the coast.
There are, we've learned a lot, and we don't have time to get into all these things in this conversation, but there certainly, particularly at the larger police departments, there's a lot that we can do to ensure that if there is a bad apple in the mist, that they can't, leave that department and go to another city and operate and get a fresh start, so to speak. I think just in general, the conversation, whether people like it or not, it's an important conversation for America to have. But you do make a really important point, and that is that how can a bad apple in Minneapolis create a scenario where it's projected on every police department in the nation? It's amazing. But what that does then is it makes community leaders, both from the African American community and from the police departments and other community and nonprofit organizations, come together, as you pointed out, and have peaceful conversations about what we can do to improve communication and what we can do to move the ball forward. And that's the way it should be. Don't you agree?
I do. I agree 100%. And you had asked me a minute ago what recruitment would look like in the future, and I think it's going to be very difficult. We had a hard time in the past hiring minorities across the board, and it was very difficult to hire young black people into this business. And I think I had several conversations with black ministers and the NAACP about why that was, and they even tend to agree with me that young black folks just didn't want to get into this business.
So
we began to move.
Let's do this. Let's finish. We're at the end of this segment. Why don't we pick up and continue the conversation about recruitment when we get on the other side?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, this is Chief John Miller from the city of Biloxi, and we'll be back after this break.
Listen live or on demand and watch episodes of Coast View on your laptop, desktop, or on your phone or tablet by going to supertalkmsgulfcoast.com.
Everyone knows the only thing better than pizza is free pizza, and right now, buy a $10 gift certificate to CiCi's Pizza for only $5. It's like buying a pizza and getting a pizza for free. Go to our station's website or Facebook. Look for the Half Off Deals logo to purchase this amazing deal right now.
What decisions are being made by state lawmakers, and how will they affect you, your family, and community? If you listen, you'll know. SuperTalk Mississippi, the SuperTalk app, and at supertalk.fl.
Hi, I'm Billy Kinder, host of Big Billy Kinder Outdoors. Here, the show Saturdays at 1, right here on SuperTalk Mississippi. Turkeys, whitetail, Grenada Lake crappie, or Gulfport redfish. We enjoy it all, especially when you're in camp with us on SuperTalk Mississippi.
COVID-19 is a severe lung infection. Trust the American Lung Association for science-based public health information, especially for the 36 million Americans who live with lung disease. We have resources to protect your lung health, access expertise from medical professionals, and peer-to-peer support through our online communities. Visit lung.
Thousands of Bulldog fans have subscribed to the Thunder and Lightning podcast. Have you? On each episode, Brian Haydad and Joel Coleman give you an inside look at your Mississippi State Bulldogs. The Thunder and Lightning podcast is free and available on demand at supertalk.fm and on your smartphone. Just search for Thunder and Lightning on iTunes, Google Play, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thunder and Lightning from SuperTalk, Mississippi, covering the Bulldogs like no one else.
Anybody can be a firefighter. Male, female, younger, older.
We have school teachers. We have leaders in business.
It's me, you, anyone that wants to be.
There is no typical firefighter.
Hey, I'm Steve Azar, and you never know who or what you'll hear when I spend a Mississippi Minute with my friends. We are with the fabulous Norbert Putnam, as he played on so many hit records, you can't count them, and produced for some of the biggest acts ever. Norbert, Elvis.
And I want to tell you about Presley. He had two different voices. He would sit and talk to me in a very calm, low voice. And we were at Stack's one night, and we were having lunch. We always had lunch at midnight because he was nocturnal. We sat there and we have our sandwiches, and at 1 o'clock, he looked up. He said, "Hey, Pot, come on, it's time for me to go beat Elvis." And he stood up, in a much deeper voice, he put on his macho voice. "Hey, fellas, it's 1 o'clock. Let's get cracking, okay?"
In a Mississippi Minute. Be sure to check out In a Mississippi Minute with me, Steve Azar, right here on SuperTalk Mississippi, Amazon Alexa, and now on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher.
Hey, want to come work for the #1 radio group on the coast? TeleSouth Media has a great opportunity for an outside sales consultant. Get paid while having fun and work in the exciting, fast-paced world of radio. We have award-winning stations like 97.9 CPR Rocks, 105.9 The Monkey, G96.7, SuperTalk 103.1, and 103.5 The Possum. Take the first step towards a new and rewarding career. Submit your resume to Jesse at telesouth.com. That's JESSE at telesouth.com. TeleSouth Media is an equal employment opportunity employer.
Talking to the people that help make the coast such a unique place to live. This is Coast View with Ricky Matthews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
This is Chief John Miller, the Chief of Police for the city of Biloxi that we're talking to. And when we went to break, we were just beginning to talk about some of the challenges of recruiting, especially minorities. So why don't we pick it up from there, Chief, and make sure you make your points on that.
Sure. And what we were talking about was how it had been difficult to recruit Black men and women into this business. And we had begun to move past that. We had been able to recruit quite a few, and we're really feeling good about things, along with women. But we really have done well here recruiting women into this business, which was something 20 years ago was a rarity. But we had really started moving forward with that. And I'm afraid that what we've seen, over the last few months is going to make that very difficult. As a matter of fact, I know that it is. Being a policeman at one time was a very sought after and certainly an honored profession, but I'm afraid that a lot of our young people don't see it that way. They don't view it that way anymore, and so I'm afraid that recruiting is going to be very, very difficult to bring young people in the future.
Yeah, I'm hoping that as you guys continue your communication with leaders in the African American community, that their outreach into the Black community can actually help you with recruitment. It seems to me that it's about humanizing a police officer, making people understand the role they play in the community, and then showing them that this is a really viable career, a really terrific, viable career with honor, and something they should strongly consider. So hopefully that leaders in the Black community can help you with that.
Well, and they have very much so in the past, and I'm sure they will in the future. And hopefully, with time, as time passes, hopefully we'll begin to see the young people coming back into this field that we did years ago.
So, Chief, you mentioned offline something about camera registration. Tell me about that.
Sure. We have partnered with a company called Fusus, and Fusus does a camera registration for us. Now, what we've done here in Biloxi is we've set up a real-time crime center, and we've been placing cameras around the city, and certainly it's costly, So we have to do it a bit at a time when we can afford it. And we actually contracted with a company called NOLA out of New Orleans to purchase those cameras at a reduced price. So that's working very well for us. They've helped us a lot get started. So we've placed cameras. Now what goes along with that is a real-time crime center. That's where all the cameras will feed back to a central location. And eventually we hope to have that staff 24 hours a day. Right now it's just recorded. We can go back if there's a crime in a particular area. If we have our camera there, we can pull it up, take a look and see if there's any evidence on that camera for us. So that's working out very well. And we know that that's going to go places, really big places in the future. And the more cameras we put out, the easier it will be to help solve crime and to keep the community safe. But again, back to FUSIS. Now, FUSIS stepped in, and what they're doing is a camera registration. If a resident or a business have their own cameras, they can register those with us through FUSIS. And we certainly won't be able to access their cameras or any of that kind of stuff. But we will have a map that will tell us where these cameras are at. And if we have a crime in that particular area, we can immediately go to that resident or that business and say, we would like to view your video. So we can't view it without their permission, but we know that it's there. It saves a whole lot of work for investigators and patrol officers that are out trying to find cameras, because every time there's a crime, that's one of the first things we do is start looking to see if there's any private cameras anywhere that we could possibly help us solve it. So this will save us a lot of time. I think it'll make people feel safer. And it's a very easy thing to do, to register.
Yeah. Hey, that's a really great idea. I mean, because you see in certain crimes that happen across the United States how over a period of time after that crime was committed, that they begin to gather, camera evidence from, various locations and whatever. At my house, I've got cameras on, aimed in every different direction. So, I would readily register for something like that because I've got two different views of the street. I've got one of Biloxi Bay. If we all did that, that could really gather a tremendous amount of potential evidence in the future, couldn't it?
Absolutely, and do it quickly. You can do it quickly. Yeah. We've had this thing up and running for about a week now, and we already have quite a few people that have registered, and we have not. We've put it out. We've put up posters. We've announced it on the media several times, but we've had a better turnout than I thought that we would. So I think most people feel like you. If you have the cameras, why not register them?
Yeah, for sure. I get that completely. Hey, in the time we have left, tell me about your current staffing. I know what you're authorized to have, but we have less than a minute to go. What's your current staffing situation?
Sure. We're down a few officers. We've had several retire lately, and we've had some that have moved on to other career fields. So we're down to about 124 sworn. We're actually allocated 133. And then in the private with our civilian employees, we're down about 4 or 5 there. So we will be doing a test here in the near future, hopefully, to get those numbers back where they need to be.
You know what, though, in the scheme of things, when you consider some of the challenges other communities are having, that's not too bad.
We're not complaining. We're not going to complain at all. Little test is a little difficult. And then if there's a psychological you have to go through, and then then you've got to meet with me, and you've got to sit down and talk with me and the rest of the command staff, and make us believers that you're a person that should be in this field. So it's difficult. It's aggravating, and it's difficult to get through everything.
Well, Chief, what we'll do is we're out of time now. We'll come back to you in a few weeks and just check in with you. We'll stay in touch with you. We are big supporters of the police and your efforts to help us build a better community. So with that said, this has been Chief John Miller from the city of Biloxi, and we'll see you again soon, buddy.
Thanks very much.
You bet. Have a great day.
Follow SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1 on Facebook, facebook.com/SuperTalk MS Coast 103.1.